Why was the internet the best thing to ever happen to the industry? Well, the industry wasn't that profitable. And it was largely because it had these bloated production and distribution costs. It was an industry based on atoms, and you created these products based on atoms and put them into cases based on atoms, and then put them onto trucks that went along highways and that used fuel made of atoms, and it went into these stores where the shelves are all made of atoms. The internet eliminates all those costs, reduce them almost to zero. So all the industry needed to do was to change music from being a product to being a service. Everyone in this room will pay $3 a month for access to any song ever recorded in history, any class of music ever, with a whole bunch of value-added services streamed to you. Streamed onto your mobile device or into your car, your home stereo, or your television, or whatever. No one here will steal music. Why would you, if you can have access to any song ever recorded at any time with all these great services, why would you take possession of the song? You won't steal music. Does anyone here take possession of YouTube videos? The whole issue of intellectual property goes away. But the music industry, rather than seeking a business model solution to a business model disruption, sought a legal solution. And this wonderful industry that brought us Elvis and the Beatles, and I'm speaking more so, by the way, of the American industry than the Canadian industry, that's been a lot more civilized. But this industry is now suing people, is hated by its customers, and is collapsing. And in macroeconomics, an insider told us that the number 3 source of revenue for the US labels is suing people that love music. How could an industry respond so badly? You know, it's just common sense. This guy takes the Beatles' White Album and Jay-Z's Black Album, remixes them, creates the Gray Album. Sales of the White Album go up, sales of the Black Album go up. Everyone should be saying, yippee. Instead, the music industry takes legal action against him. You don't need to own intellectual property in a traditional sense. But it requires using these principles to rebuild the industry. The industry needed to come together, and it needed to place all music in a commons, and then to work out the actual actuarial economics to divvy up the revenue. So if I listen to Rolling Stones Can't Get No Satisfaction, a few microcents go through this commons to the Rolling Stones. This would be good for music lovers, because they could have access to all music. It'd be good for musicians, because right now, a lot of musicians with this old industrial age model of music can't make a living. There's a great klezmer band somewhere in Ottawa, then these guys are working as waiters, because they're never going to get a recording contract. Because with the old industrial model, you could only bet on home run hitters. You could never bet on a bunter or a singles hitter, because only 1 out of 20 would ever make money. So you had to make sure they were going to be a home run hitter. So all these musicians have been unable to make a living through the thing that they love. A new model would free up all kinds of value and capability and give musicians access to markets. Now, the klezmer band is not going to be Lady Gaga, but they're going to make a living doing what they love. So it'd be good for musicians, and it would be good for the record industry itself. But they were locked into an old model. What does a new model look like? Well, we can see the contours. Nobody knows exactly in all of these, but you can see the contours of a new model, and Spotify would be a great one, streaming audio. Now, it's just nibbling at the edges because it needs the whole music industry to come together to make this happen. A music industry that collaborates, that shares intellectual property, that understands interdependence, that our interests are consistent with the interests of our customers, musicians, and other players, even our competitors in the industry. How about publishing? Well, it's almost as brutal. You know, we've got all these newspapers that are going bankrupt. Some of you, when macroeconomics came out, I was interviewed by Jean Ghomeshi on the Q, and it was the day after the Globe announced that it was making a $1 billion investment in a physical printing press on an 18-year lease. And so we talked about all the complexities of the publishing industry, and at the end, he said, okay, Don, when all is said and done, will we be reading physical newspapers in 18 years? And I said, I just found myself saying, I might, but my kids won't. My kids don't today. So what's the new model? Well, is it the Huffington Post? I'm not sure. I don't think it is. What are we trying to achieve here? First of all, we need good journalism. We need quality. We need investigative reporting. We need balance. I mean, now with all this multiplicity of media, we can kind of line up with our own little perspective, right? And there's a danger of this balkanization where we're all kind of in our own little self-reinforcing echo chambers, getting information not to inform us, but to give us comfort. It's, you know, Fox News, Glenn Beck can say President Obama is a fascist. And he can say that on television. I was in Berlin, I mentioned recently, and I talked about this, and I said, I'm sure you find this even more offensive than I do, because you know what fascism is. Well, so we need to address that problem. And another thing we need to address that the Huffington Post does not address is we need to pay journalists. So we can't have all journalists being volunteers. I mean, I write for the Huffington Post. I don't get any money, and I don't have any great problem with Arianna Huffington making a lot of money, as it was recently sold to AOL for $315 million, and I don't get any of that, and that's fine with me. I mean, I knew the deal. I was writing for the Huff in order to have influence. But you can see the contours of some new models happening. One is you create compelling value. The Economist is pretty old school. Their website is not that great. But if you live in the United States and you want access to international news, you have to subscribe to The Economist. My brother lives in Denver, and the Denver Post, I mean, every time I go down there, I look at this thing, I just shake my head. It's like man bites dog, dog bites man. And there's a great thing in The Onion that just came out today. I don't know if you saw that, a fake news report of woman crying in subway. And then they have this whole news report. Why is she crying? You know, did she lose her job? Maybe she lost her lover. And then they have a survey, you know, who thinks someone should go and talk to the woman in the subway? You know, I mean, no, if you want to know what's going on in the world, you have to read The Economist, and people will pay for value. You know, something like Thomson Reuters, here's a company enormously successful, delivering information, but it has great value. It's delivered at the time where you're not price sensitive. If you're a lawyer about to make a pitch to a judge, you're not price sensitive. You want to know about the latest case law. You're a doctor about to operate. You want to know about drug interactions. You're not price sensitive. So Rupert Murdoch, bless his heart, decides, no, people are going to pay. We're going to have a paywall for the Times. A colleague of mine, I was just talking to him at Davos, his name is Clay Shirky, did a big analysis of this whole thing. He figured Rupert Murdoch lost 95% of his online subscribers by putting up a paywall. And the cost of doing that far outweighed any kind of benefits that they might have got, or revenue that they might have got. So then there's a model. You think about the New York Times. We're looking at this thing. We're all on this death watch. How much longer can it service its debt? Well, maybe it ought to become an NGO. And here's a whole model here that basically you get to fund good journalism. So journalists will put a pitch out, I want to do a big investigation on this topic, and you can put in money to investigate that topic. I, by the way, publish a newspaper. It's called Don Tapscott's Innovators Daily. It's a Twitter feed of 100 innovators. And every day to produce this newspaper, it takes me 0 minutes. And it took me 1 minute to set the whole thing up. It's pretty interesting what this thing comes up with. But it's not a viable model, because I don't get the advertising revenue. So what is a viable model? Well, The Guardian has said we're opening everything up. Our entire backlog of everything written for The Guardian is now free and available, and they're trying to build a huge audience where they can generate advertising revenue. But you can see the new model and the contours emerging with fashion bloggers. Do you know, for all bloggers, 28% of bloggers do so for commercial reasons. Half of them, 14%, make a full-time living. Of those 14%, 80% have a university degree, 40% have a graduate degree, and 2/3 of them are former journalists. You think of bloggers, you think, oh, they're all wacky people. 2/3 of the bloggers that make a full-time living, 14% of all bloggers, are former journalists. So why don't we create a virtual newspaper? And you guys are the economics bloggers, and we'll get the best ones, and you're the political bloggers and the sports bloggers and the media bloggers and the culture bloggers, and you people look like accountants back there, so you can do the actuarial economics to figure out how this money, oh yeah, we'll have these people be doing sales for ads, and we create something that starts to approach the New York Times. Everybody's getting paid. Maybe we'll have some wisdom and have balance. You are the left-wing political bloggers, and you're the right-wing political bloggers, so we can address that issue of balkanization. This is a model that brings us news for a new networked age. So I'm running out of time here, so you can read macroeconomics if you want to know about that. How about television? Well, we have these we have a technology push on TV. We have a demographic pull. These kids, they're not watching television in the traditional sense. They consume media very differently. We have the whole social revolution. Then we have the economics affecting television. So, I mean, the writing's on the wall for the traditional model of cable, and you can start to see in Canada and the United States that there aren't new subscribers, and subscriptions are actually starting to decline, as many of us predicted years and years ago. I was actually, in 1997, I was asked to give the opening talk to the Canadian Association of Broadcasters. John Cassidy at Chorus, who's now at Chorus, invited me to do that, and he said, I want you to talk about the future of broadcasting. So I stood up and I said, it's a great topic, the future of broadcasting. I think that broadcasting won't be broad and it won't be casting. Are there any questions? And I escaped with my life, but then they invited me back 10 years later to talk about what had actually happened. Of course, all of this is occurring. So the distribution model is changing. You know, Netflix is I don't know if you're signed up for this, but this is a very a powerful thing. Broadcasting won't be broad in the sense, and it won't be narrowcasting either, like 500 channels. There are 50 million channels. It's molecular, not broad. And it's not casting because the viewer, the listener, does the casting. So as we used to say, prime time is my time. So it's also moving to a whole new digital platform, and that frees up a world of opportunity and also a world of grief and danger for incumbents. So Google TV, and we've got all kinds of new models, Apple TV and so on, that are just that stream content that enables prime time to be any time, and that are changing the economics of the industry. And of course, when television becomes bits behave differently. You can search them. You can, and already we're in the early days of being able to search on a keyword in a TV show or on a certain actor and so on. You can do all kinds of things like make these bits interactive. Stop the action there. What kind of car is that? Whoa, I'd like to check that out. In fact, let me do a real-time animation test drive. Can I go into a community about that car? I'd like to see some third-party ratings and evaluations of that car. So again, it's a very, very exciting world. And you can see the contours of this emerging. This is not futuristic stuff. This is now all happening today.